The national news desk, locally covered. Nationally connected.
In a period of just 7 months, I have ended 7 unendable wars. They said they were unendable. You're never going to get them solved.
President Trump touting the return of American strength during his first address to the United Nations General Assembly since returning to office. What he had to say on the failures of globalism, his sharp criticism of the UN, and much more. Then big decisions in the case of now. Well, tonight, the gathering of world leaders in New York for the purpose of being united.
At the United Nations, a packed agenda with global implications.
Because of my relationship with President Putin, which had always been a good one.
During a 56-minute speech centered around his America First agenda, Donald Trump blamed the UN for climate change, which he called a hoax, and for its financial assistance for migrants coming to the United States.
Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the #1 political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration.
One of the most glaring examples of division between the United States and so many traditional allies was support for a Palestinian state. With Israel's war in Gaza resulting in the death of more than 64,000 people, most women and children, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry.
The United Kingdom formally recognizes the state of Palestine, a pledge to the Palestinian and Israeli people that there can be a better future.
President Trump on this matter has continued to side with Israel in its staunch opposition to a Palestinian state.
This would be a reward for these horrible atrocities, including October 7th, even while they refuse to release the hostages or accept a ceasefire.
President Trump also highly critical of Russia, once again threatening to use, quote, powerful tariffs if Russia doesn't make a deal to end the war. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, is scheduled to speak on Saturday. Taylor?
And Christine, any idea what's next in the U.S.-UN relationship?
Look, on one hand, Trump had plenty of criticism for the United Nations, saying it wasn't well run, even criticizing the broken teleprompter and escalator, which stopped running when he and First Lady Melania Trump stepped on. He has recently cut U.S. funding for the governing body, but also told UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, quote, our country is behind the United Nations 100%, so at least for now, expect him to return to the annual meeting next year.
In Washington, D.C., Christine Frizzell, thank you. And as President Trump addressed the UN today, he also called for an end to the development of biological weapons once and for all.
Just a few years ago, reckless experiments overseas gave us a devastating global pandemic. Yet despite that worldwide catastrophe, many countries are continuing extremely risky research into bioweapons and man-made pathogens. This is unbelievably dangerous.
President Trump says his administration is now leading an international effort to enforce the Biological Weapons Convention, which bans the development, production, and acquisition of biological weapons. He says he'll meet with top leaders around the world and test out a new AI-powered verification system. President Trump has long claimed the COVID-19 virus leaked from a lab in Wuhan, China. On the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, President Trump meeting with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky as Russia steps up attacks. President Trump applauded Zelensky's ongoing defense against Russia, calling him a brave man. This sit-down coming weeks after President Trump agreed to participate in post-war security guarantees for Ukraine during a meeting at the White House last month. Well, today, when asked about the specifics of the security guarantees, the president said this.
Well, that's later down the road. We'll be talking about that. Hopefully, we'll be in a position to talk about that a little bit later on.
And in a Truth Social post late this afternoon, the president says he believes Ukraine can win against Russia and once again threatened big economic trouble for Putin. The man who prosecutors say tried to assassinate then-candidate President Donald Trump at his Palm Beach golf course last year has been found guilty on all charges. Jurors reached that verdict after 2 hours of deliberation. Ryan Ruth tried to stab himself in the neck with a pin after that verdict was read aloud. He's convicted of several federal charges, including attempting to assassinate a presidential candidate. Ruth faces life behind bars. His sentence will be determined by a federal judge. Well, Americans are more likely today to say immigrants benefit the country and contribute to economic growth than they have been in the past months. A new AP NORC survey today, fewer adults say legal immigration should be reduced than in January, 32% versus 23%. And compared to March 2024, more Americans say immigrants contribute to economic growth. More also say they enrich American culture and values and take jobs Americans don't exactly want. Well, shares of the maker of Tylenol rebounded somewhat today, but still closed lower than last week. They fell yesterday as President Trump urged pregnant women not to take the painkiller with acetaminophen due to evidence suggesting this leads to autism and has ties to autism. Trump's announcement was met with fierce criticism, highlighting the divide between the medical establishment and HHS. One health reporter commented on that divide.
Even, so many people are dismissive. What do you mean that Tylenol causes autism? That sounds crazy. This is an area that has been under investigation, right? It's not like this is totally out of left field. And, even looking at some of the statements, a lot of them do recognize that, yes, there have been some studies that maybe suggest an association, and there is an acknowledgement.
And Kenview disputes any such link and warns pregnant mothers should take Tylenol when they have a fever. President Trump and administration officials say they are also researching other possible contributions and contributors to the rise in autism. Turning Point USA launched a national tour just one day after thousands gathered to mourn Charlie Kirk. The conservative organization is promising to carry on his mission. The National News Desk, Kayla Gaskins, reports from Washington.
Political activist Charlie Kirk may be gone, but his mission continues as others pick up the torch.
Let's not let that USA chant die.
Kirk's fall tour continued on Monday at the University of Minnesota. Prominent conservative commentators and politicians are stepping in to host.
The assassin, as well as the people who excused and cheered him on, thought that they could stop Charlie Kirk's movement. In reality, they have not even stopped his lecture tour.
Continuing Kirk's legacy of civil debate.
The current administration has engaged in lawfare, cancel culture, and ideological purity tests.
The college campus tour back in action just a day after Kirk's memorial service in Arizona. Turning Point said 200,000 people registered to attend. Local authorities reportedly estimated at least that many showed up, packing the Arizona Cardinals Stadium, the NHL Coyote Stadium next door, and the streets of Phoenix.
The world needs Turning Point USA.
Charlie's wife, Erica Kirk, picking up where her husband left off as Turning Point's CEO and chair.
His passion was my passion, and now his mission is my mission. Everything that Turning Point USA built through Charlie's vision and hard work, we will make 10 times greater through the power of his memory.
Turning Point Action harnessing some of that power at the memorial service to register voters, setting up voter registration tables. This comes as Turning Point continues receiving a flood of donations. The number is reportedly upwards of $6 million. Turning Point has also received at least 62,000 requests to open new chapters across the country.
The fall tour continues Wednesday at Virginia Tech, where Governor Glenn Youngkin and Megyn Kelly will speak. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Jimmy Kimmel's suspension from ABC is short-lived. The network says Jimmy Kimmel Live will return tonight. Production was suspended last week following host Jimmy Kimmel's controversial monologue on the assassination of political activist Charlie Kirk. ABC says Kimmel's reinstatement follows thoughtful conversations with the comedian. Tonight, our parent company, Sinclair, will preempt Jimmy Kimmel Live across its ABC affiliate stations and replace it with news programming. Discussions between Sinclair and ABC are ongoing to evaluate the show's potential return. Attorneys for Sean Diddy Combs say he served enough jail time. In a new filing, Combs' attorneys urge a federal judge to sentence him to no more than 14 months. Now, he's already been behind bars for nearly 13. In July, the music mogul was found guilty of 2 prostitution-related charges, both with a maximum sentence of 10 years. So if the judge agrees, Combs would go home almost immediately. Sentencing is set for October 3rd. The suspected Gilgo Beach serial killer will face one single trial today. A New York State Supreme Court justice ruled that Rex Heuermann will not get to have multiple trials. The justice also rejected defense attorney's second request to throw out some DNA evidence. Heuermann is charged in the deaths of 7 women. He's due back in court in January. Well, donations are just pouring in for the family of Ryan Easley. That's the tiger handler mauled to death in Oklahoma. A GoFundMe has been set up to help provide for his wife and daughter and has now raised over $30,000. Deputies say during the end of a big cat show at the Growler Pines Tiger Preserve, a tiger unexpectedly started to bite and then shake Easley as onlookers watched. Easley has raised that tiger from a cub, and it's not clear yet if the animal will be euthanized. Coming up, the potentially catastrophic security threat stopped by the Secret Service before the UN General Assembly today. Then new information from the Federal Reserve Chairman about inflation, tariffs, and future interest rate cuts. Plus, an update about NASA's plans for its Artemis 2 mission to send humans back to the moon. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I found this story just fascinating. The Secret Service says it seized and dismantled a cache of equipment in the New York region capable of crashing the cellular network. It comes as world leaders gather for the UN General Assembly. Agents found more than 100,000 SIM cards and 300 servers that could cripple cell towers, inhibit emergency responses, or be used for surveillance. It's actually one of the largest communications threats thwarted on U.S. soil. Investigators say they have not revealed a direct plot to disrupt the assembly. Meanwhile, a broken teleprompter almost did disrupt the assembly, but the president laughed it off. In his address to the United Nations, President Trump's teleprompter went out. He read from his notes until it returned midway through, making jokes about the failure. And another mishap, the building's escalator that stopped working. Look at this. There it is. The First Lady and the president had to walk up it themselves.
If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen. But she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the two things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter.
In other news now, the Federal Reserve Chair delivered his first public remarks since the Fed approved its first interest rate cut of 2025. At a luncheon in Rhode Island, Jerome Powell said the Fed cannot ignore the risk of higher inflation. The possibility for rising prices is a lingering concern as America's central bankers also keep an eye on a slowing labor market. He said it's a challenging situation for Fed policymakers. Now, Powell also restated his assessment that tariff increases were likely to lead to one-time increases in prices.
Uncertainty around the path of inflation remains high. We will carefully assess and manage the risk of higher and more persistent inflation. We'll make sure that this one-time increase in prices does not become an ongoing inflation problem.
Powell avoided giving strong hints about the Fed's next meeting, which is on October 28th and 29th, signaling a cautious approach to future interest rate cuts. A key meeting aimed at preventing a government shutdown scrapped as the threat still looms. President Trump calling off that meeting planned for Thursday with top congressional Democrats. And now there's finger pointing on social media as to who's to blame for the stalemate in these talks. President Trump posting on Truth Social today saying talks would not be productive because Democrats are asking for what he calls unserious and ridiculous demands, including over $1 trillion in new spending to support their agenda. Meanwhile, Senator Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries are shifting the blame on X. Jeffries posting, quote, Trump always chickens out in reference to the canceled meeting. Schumer saying in a post aimed at the president, quote, when you're finished ranting, we can sit down and discuss health care. President Trump has left the door open for another meeting in the future if Democrats, in his words, quote, become realistic. The government will technically run out of money at the end of the month. Attorney General Pam Bondi's chief of staff, Chad Mizell, is leaving the Justice Department. This comes as President Trump has been ramping up pressure on the DOJ to prosecute his political opponents. Now, Mizell has worked closely with Bondi to reverse Biden-era policies. He told Axios earlier today he will continue to support the Trump administration, but now focus on exposing left-wing groups responsible for violence across America. It is getting crowded in the Atlantic Ocean with two tropical waves on the radar alongside Hurricane Gabrielle. That storm is currently bringing life-threatening surf and rip current conditions to the U.S. East Coast from North Carolina northward, as you can see. And now there's a 90% chance of development from Disturbance 1 over the next week and a 60% chance of development from Disturbance 2. And tornadoes are possible this evening in parts of Oklahoma and Arkansas, with one or two of them potentially being pretty strong. Cities like Muskogee, Oklahoma and Fort Smith, Arkansas are at highest risk. Over 40 million other Americans are at risk for thunderstorms tonight across a broad portion of the country from Arizona all the way to Maine. Well, this is interesting. Major League Baseball will start using robot umpires next year. Let me explain. Today, the MLB Competition Committee approved the use of the automated ball strike system. Human umpires will still make the calls, but they can be appealed by a computer. Each team will be allowed to challenge 2 calls per game. The minor leagues have been testing the robot umpires since 2019. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. And we start in Utah, where a councilman has resigned after threatening to defund local police. This is the Pulse of America.
Justin, I promise you, I will do everything in my power as a city council member to make sure these guys are defunded. There will be 5 police officers in this town because this is unbelievable.
This police body camera footage was given to us by the Herald Journal, and it shows Smithfield City Council member Ted Stokes fuming at officers, threatening to shrink the 12-person police force, along with criticizing and mocking them.
Why are you here?
He's asking you which car is involved.
Yeah, I want to know why there's 2 officers responding to such a simple thing. We pay a lot of money for you guys in the city. Okay. And I decide whether the budget's good or not.
Police say the officers were responding to a complaint after Stokes' son hit a parked car and damaged both vehicles earlier that day. Councilman Stokes sent us this apology where he apologized to the council and the officers involved. He said his unprofessional conduct violated a canon of ethics.
Have a better day. See ya.
Using a paint sprayer, floodlights, and a generator, David Castro and Kristen Hoover from Oklahoma started the project at 8 p.m. Saturday and finished about 7 Sunday morning. Hoover says the tribute is meant to inspire unity regardless of your political beliefs.
The Cadillac Ranch gives us a spot to where we can practice freedom of speech. And growing up as an artist, there's a lot of places that I wasn't supposed to paint and I could get in trouble for painting. And so that was a place that we could go to and, practice that without any fear. And I would hope that other places would kind of follow along and allow context from both sides, just like Charlie would want.
Castro says they used 15 gallons of paint and they chose Old Glory Red, which is the same color of the red stripes on the U.S. flag.
Leaders of churches, synagogues, mosques, and others feel security is necessary in places of worship.
We're living in some perilous times where the church is a sanctuary still, but to some people it's not a sanctuary or a holy place. So we have to be able to protect our parishioners that will come into worship service or just come to meetings in general. Senator
Don Gates says he is introducing new legislation to make it easier for these places to feel more secure. The bill requires volunteers to follow a sheriff-approved security plan, complete a background check, and hold a valid Florida concealed weapon or firearm license. But the church would not have to have the state security license.
So this is expanding gun rights and making it clear that, unfortunately, our houses of worship who want to be protected have to have a way of being protected and have the state approve it.
Coming up, Kamala Harris is criticizing her own party. The harsh words for Democrats in the former vice president's new book right after this. Well, Kamala Harris is out with a new book going behind the scenes of her short campaign for president in 2024. It contains some harsh words for members of her own party. The National News Desk, Matt Galka, reports from Washington.
Former Vice President Kamala Harris's new book, 107 Days, takes on multiple members of her own party and the issues that hurt Democrats in the 2024 election. She also says she should have spoken up sooner about former President Joe Biden's decision to not seek re-election following questions about his ability to serve.
Was that grace to not bring it up to him, or was it reckless? And on my part, I do reflect on that and feel that there was a recklessness about not raising it with him.
The book has already rubbed some Democrats the wrong way, with former Obama advisor David Axelrod telling Politico, if there's a political strategy here, it's a bad one. Others have suggested Harris will need to take some accountability for the failed campaign and for the conversations she didn't have with Biden.
She's going to have to answer to how she was in the room and yet never said anything publicly.
Another revelation from the book centers around passing over former openly gay Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg as her pick for vice president, writing in part, But we were already asking a lot of America to accept a black woman married to a Jewish man. Part of me wanted to say, screw it, let's just do it. But knowing what was at stake, it was too big of a risk.
To be a black woman running for president of the United States and as a vice presidential running mate, a gay man, with the stakes being so high, it made me very sad, but I also realized it would be a real risk.
Buttigieg said he was surprised by the excerpt.
I just believe in giving Americans more credit than that. My experience in politics has been that the way that you earn trust with voters is based mostly on what they think you're going to do for their lives, not on categories.
What the book doesn't address is Harris's political future. She's already ruled out a run for California's governor, and at least for now, she says she's focused on her book tour. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka.
Coming up, a historic moon mission may happen sooner than expected. The new launch window for Artemis 2 right after this. Astronauts' first time leaving low Earth orbit since 1972 could happen as early as February. Today, NASA said it is planning its launch window for the Artemis 2 moon mission to begin on February 5th.
This will be the furthest and also the closest approach to the moon in about 50 years. And as you know, the goal is to stay and establish a sustained presence on the moon. So we think it's important that we establish a sort of playbook for what you might consider interplanetary travel.
The mission was originally supposed to launch this year, but was delayed several times. It's going to be pretty out of this world, and we are out of time. Sorry, I had to. Thank you for joining us for this edition of the National News Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening. I'm Taylor Murray. Thanks for watching.